you all know me, so it's you know, and I thank you that at least I have musician friends and a girlfriend.
At least,
You know.
we're in the category all unto ourselves.
To me, it is, you know, it brings up, it's interesting being here in Mount Shasta, because with the exception of working where I do and playing music, I really don't socialize outside of that. That's kind of my circle of influence. It's basically been the chai shop and places that I go where people perform, and it's an interesting thing, because I feel like I'm bonding to my experience here to Mount Shasta, because I feel definitely a connection to the mountain, and I feel connected to people that I've met that have listened to me play music and that I've had a chance to play music with, and it's really cool. It's kind of like the endearing thing about Mount Shasta is the music for me, because I get to play with lots of different people, and it's really cool. And it's getting better, and it's getting more interesting. I literally got a call yesterday to go play for $100, and the music was Brazilian Latinese jazz with a saxophone player, a singer, and a guitar player, and a keyboard player. And there were 4 of us, and it was great. You know, it was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And so my idea is what bonds us to our humanity. And the funny thing is, it's so simple that people don't realize how simple it is. And I learned this by doing inner bonding taught by Margaret Paul. And it was a 5-day intensive, and the experience was very interesting because I needed 30 different elements to work out in order for me to do it, and it was like dominoes. They just one after the other, and literally from Friday to Wednesday, everything worked itself out, from time off to the money that I needed to just everything. It was the most synchronistic experience that I've ever had. Anyway, what I learned during this 5-day intensive, I read a book written by Jean Liedloff called The Continuum Concept in Search of Happiness Lost. And Jean Liedloff was, or is, an anthropologist. She's probably retired right now because the book was written in 1975 that she wrote. And she came up with a very simple premise. She went down as an anthropologist to Venezuela, and she studied 2 indigenous tribes. And one of the tribes had a very straightforward technique after a child was born. The child was held by someone in the community 24/7 for an entire year. There was never a point in which the child was separated from an adult. And one of the things that Jean saw was within 3 years, the child was fully adapted into the integrity of the tribe with no social abnormality at all with any of its members. So there was a homogeneousness within the context of simply holding the body. We do it as hugging. The idea with us, which is interesting, is that what the medical profession does after a child is born, it separates the child from the mother for about 72 hours under the premise that we want to make sure there's nothing wrong with the baby. But what's actually happening is it breaks the ability for the child to bond to anyone or anything. It breaks that cycle. So what happens is, it means that there's a perpetual process of the child wanting to bond to something other than what is natural to it, which to me is a very interesting point, because that means that something out there has the ability to manipulate, control, and so on within the context of the psychology of that which is seeking to bond to its own experience because it hasn't happened yet. Look at any family where there is not bonding taking place at any level, and you end up with people that are serial killers, you end up with rapists, you end up with people that are violent, that are hostile, and so on. From that one simple technique. If it's missing maternal deprivation, one of the most interesting things I have ever seen was what happens to a child if it is not touched at all. It literally stunts the growth of the body. And the particular video that I saw was a baby that had been in a crib for about 9 months and had never been interacted with the parents at all, and it looked like more animal than human. And it was the most disturbing thing that I have ever seen when it comes to something of that nature. I couldn't believe it. And there it was. What happens is that within the context of bonding, bonding has a natural progression, which is the chapters in my book. It begins with bonding, nurturance, encouragement, development, discipline, adaptation, and self-mastery. And the idea of self-mastery is simply, can a person get to his or her life where everything is fine as it is and everything works out consistently without too much drama or stress, and that? Do we have hurdles that we have to try to get over in order for a simple thing to take place, like a relationship, like a job, just the simple process of like going to the store? Is there stuff that comes up that we have to negotiate and navigate so that our life can simply go about being what it is within the context of our life? When we think about the idea of bonding, we have what we're bonded to as a life issue, male and female, is a case in point. So we have that entire dynamic going on. We have the soul's blueprint that it has before the soul incarnates. It pretty much is a pattern that the life corresponds to, but it's not carved in stone. It's an open-ended gestalt. It's an open-ended process. Elements can come in besides that if we simply apply ourselves to it. One of the nice things about having a relationship is there can be the process of hugging, cuddling, holding the body, because one of the experiences that I had when I was doing this 5-day intensive was, at that period of my life, and it was about 15 to 20 years ago, I still had unresolved hostility, and that would present itself during this workshop, because one of the things that inner bonding does is it brings up family gestalts, decisions that were made by the child because mom said this, dad said that, mom said this, dad did that, and so on. And that once a child makes a decision, it will be that way until the decision that was made is changed. Case in point, I asked my mother when I was 9 years old and I was all happy and giggly on her lap, and I said, "How do you feel about me being your son?" And this was her response. "If it was up to me, I would have only had 2 children. I'm number 3. Oh. So you walk away saying, oh, I'm unwanted, I'm unloved, and all of these things. Now, that was the decision when I made when I was 9. When I was in my early 20s, I remember that, and what do you think I felt? It was like somebody took something that was sharp, stabbed it right in my heart. And this is interesting because I'm literally walking across the street to where my mom was working at the time, which was in the Christian Science reading room at Funston and Clement Street, when I remember that. And then I walked in to face my mother after feeling this intense pain, because she was simply being honest with me. She ended up having 4 children. And the interesting thing about the family dynamic is my younger sister, being the 4th, has been an alcoholic for 50 plus years. Now, she had a medical condition so she can't drink anymore, but my older sister's an alcoholic. She has a self-filling glass. She drinks Chardonnay from Franzia, from a box, and that glass, she starts at 9 o'clock in the morning, first thing of the day, and that glass literally she doesn't stop drinking till the end of the day. And she doesn't see that as a concession. So that's an aspect of bonding. That's what she has felt bonded to within the context of the deprivation that took place as her experience. If you look at addiction, dysfunction, and distraction, they are maternal deprivations, because those 3 things come from a sense of lack, need, want, and wound specifically. If we don't work that out in our experience, they are going to be there for the duration. And we humans don't do a very good job of, 1, letting stuff go. We don't do a very good job of doing personal work. I've been fortunate that over the years I've been involved with all kinds of different seminars, workshops, talks. I did the 5-day intensive with Margaret Paul, all so that I can simply feel comfortable as my life, as who I am, so that the right thing at the right time for the right reason is my experience with the right people. the beauty of being here in Mount Shasta is, I call it the oneness of synchronicity. And I've never thought about it in that way until I came back to California. And almost from day one, the oneness of synchronicity is, wow, that's a cool synchronicity. I'll give you a case in point. I decide that I want, I guess it was Charles Fillmore's interpretation of the Bible. 45 minutes later, I'm walking into an apartment where the lady has the book. And she hands it to me, and then I start reading it. And then after reading it for about an hour, I decide, no, I don't need to read any more of this stuff because it's too biblical and it's too ponderous, and I felt that some of the ideas were misguided. The interesting thing about bondedness is that when bonded takes place, and we're bonded to our gender, we're bonded to our race, we're bonded to our family, we're bonded to these things as gestalts that we live with and we work through. The idea is that can we let something go? And can we do it quickly enough so that we simply feel good about ourselves on a continuous basis? And it's impossible to do 24/7. The idea of coming to this ideal state forever is, to me, not very intelligent and not very wise, because the simple fact is, at this level of consciousness, there's always something else. One of the things that I've learned within the context of bonding is we resolve our issues, we develop our talents, and we work with conscious awareness. That's it. Those are three things. Resolving our issues, and everybody has their issues. Everybody has stuff that they're faced with, and some stuff is really ponderous, and some stuff is very, very daunting. However, there is nothing that is so daunting that it cannot be resolved given enough time, discipline, patience, and so on. And we have to be easy on ourselves. You know, I tend to be very, very hard on myself. I used to self-abuse myself when I used to make mistakes. I used to literally start punching my face because I absolutely hated to make a mistake. And then I realized, I said, man, you've got to stop doing this. So then I said, well, what is the alternative to self-abuse? And that is accepting and loving who you are and appreciating the fact that when you make a mistake, it means that you simply didn't take enough into consideration for what was trying to be accomplished. And sometimes we simply don't take the detail that's necessary into consideration. And I used to just absolutely get enraged with myself if I made a mistake. And it wouldn't make any difference what the mistake was. Now, one of the things that I was bonded to as a child was rage. I would flip out. And I got violent as a child. I would throw things. I would hurt things. And I realized when I was 10 that if I did not get a handle on my anger as rage, I was either going to kill myself because I was suicidal. There were times in my teens where I was deciding what I was going to do to end my experience. And then I decided one day to walk away from it. And I was living at 5th and Racket Club in San Rafael, and I walked out of the house, and I walked 5 miles to downtown San Rafael, turned around and walked back. That process took 4 hours to do, and I have never considered it an option. And yes, it does present itself. It does. But this is what happens. When the idea of suicide presents itself to me, I think about all of the people that are my friends and how they would be hurt by that.
Yeah, we would.
You'd be pissed off at you.
Yeah.
The nice thing is, you know, because you feel this sadness. And sadness works on many different ways. One is, we feel what we do because we can only feel what others feel based upon what we do. And the only thing that happens is that you feel what people are going through, and all you can do is be sad because there's nothing you can do about the circumstance. You cannot change it. You cannot. The only thing that you can do is you can move from it. And you can relate to where people are at, because you have been there as the pain that they feel. And as much as I try to get away from the sadness, it can't be done. I mean, in some ways, I don't like the fact that when I think of humanity, I move into tears. And it used to be to where I would get so sad that I couldn't function. So I asked, how can I resolve the bondedness of sadness to my life when it comes to others? Because I would just think about humanity and I would start sobbing. So one day I was walking into a bookstore and Joanna Macy's book, World is Lover, World is Self, presented it to my consciousness, and I read the book and I studied the book, and the general idea is the importance of grieving.
Amen.
So I did a grieving process that lasted 20 years. So that when I'm in an environment where people are suffering, and everybody has that process because it's natural to the human condition, we cannot live our life humanly without work, because the only way that we move from point A to point B is through what something is not, because it's the only way we can recognize what's real and true. Is you have to move through the illusion so that you can recognize what it is in the first place. You can't move into joy, love, light, consciousness without moving first through pain, through fear, through darkness, through unconsciousness. You can't get there from here unless you are willing to work through it. Most people are, I had a lady tell me, and this is when I was giving a talk at a Unity Church in Bozeman, and she was a friend of mine, and one day after my little talk about the importance of pain and so forth, she says, I hear where you're coming from. She says, but I absolutely do not want to address the pain at all. What do you notice? If there's a natural childbirth that takes place,
no pain, no gain.
No pain, no gain. So here's what you notice. Guess what? What do you think the most painful experience ever within the context of the life is? The birthing process. There is nothing more painful as an experience for the woman and the fetus when it is coming out of the womb. Little tidbit people don't realize. If the soul was inside of the fetus when it was born, the fetus would die from the pain because it would kill it before it was born. Because it would not be able to handle the level of the pain that it experienced. Flip side. Immediately following pain through the birthing experience is joy. It's joy, specifically joy. And then love. And then it moves to compassion and kindness and so on.
I've heard of orgasmic birth. I mean, I've never had a baby, but
Right.
I've heard it's possible. So.
Yeah, okay, well that's an option to the rule too. And I have a feeling that it takes a certain degree of mindset for that to take place. But when thinking within the context of bonding, the thing that is interesting about being human and what we're bonded to is, we're bonded to God, we're bonded to the universe, but those are so, you know, they're so big and vast and that kind of stuff. I always find it interesting when people talk about, okay, well, we're trying to raise our awareness to a higher level. Okay, so we're thinking of it in this way. However, and we think of it in this way, we think of the scientific A plus B equals C. Here, observation, and then I make a conclusion, and that's kind of like how we think of things, reason through things, and so on. However, how does consciousness work? Well, it doesn't work as a straight line. It works as something like this, and like this, and like this, and like this. It expands just like a globe. And the more conscious an individual is, the larger the size of the holograph. The body is a holograph. The planet is a holograph. The universe is a holograph. They are exactly the same thing. You know what fascinates me about the body? It has the exact mineral water composition as the planet, which means there's no difference between it. So let's take the analogy a little bit further. Okay? What if the sun is to my heart, because guess what? When the love is there, my heart starts radiating, just like the sun. The body absorbs like the planet. Well, what if the two hemispheres of my brain are simply the quarter phases of the moon? And what if my soul as consciousness is simply the universe? So what we have is sun, earth, moon, and universe as mind, body, spirit, soul that just happen to be will, love, light, and consciousness as who we are, as a human representation, as male and female. I'm going to do an exercise. So I'm going to need my companion Ariel to come up because this is something that is important to do. So, okay, so now here she is and here is I am, and now you're making an observation of us. What do you see as us?
Perfection.
And then, what do you see every time you see a man or a woman facing themselves? And the importance of man and woman is this is the design, this is the good salt. Okay, you can sit down. So anyway, one of the things that happened to me about 25 years ago, I was sitting in a restaurant and I was observing this couple, and the couple was just absolutely, to me, they were in love, they liked each other, and they just had it all going on. And they were about 55 years old, 50 to 60 years old. But then an interesting thing presented itself to my vision. I saw the entire creation as the man and the woman sitting there. And the male and the female ceased to exist, and the entire creation from God to universe and so on was right there as man and woman. Within the context of bonding, what we find is we find our life is bonded to the existence of what is within the context of that which is not. In Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh is told by God, and this is a quote from the book, in the absence of that which is not, that which is not. And I said, that's exactly right. My experience was, prior to reading that, was that lacking a contrast, something cannot be recognized and known from the perspective of observation, because without an opposite, it doesn't exist as it is. One of the fun things about being who we are is that we get to enjoy ourselves, and that's one of the really cool things Beloved gets to play. All of us are basically players in some context or capacity. And it's really cool that we have that. One of the things that I find is one of the most curious words in the English language besides oxymoron is normal. Infinity prevents normal from existing because no two states are the same ever. It just absolutely fascinates me. No two grains of sand are the same. No two blades of grass, no two snowflakes, no two human beings. So why is it that within the context of our lives we have this idea of trying to fit in to something that's irrelevant from the perspective of uniqueness? It's irrelevant. And yet you have people that decide, okay, we're all going to be golfers, or we're going to be basketball players, or we're going to be this and we're going to be that and that kind of stuff. And then we lose sight of what our uniqueness is. And then all of a sudden we do a real curious thing. We have this idea that uniqueness is not to be allowed, not to be accepted. We want conformity. We want the normal, rather than the beauty of what is as it is. Like all of us in this room, there's truth and beauty, 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 truth and beauty in someone. There's love on the one hand, and then there's wisdom on the other hand. You know, which is what I find, to me it's a curious thing that we don't allow for that. It's almost like there's this underlying tenet that humanness is not allowed. There's like this unwritten tenet. It's not allowed. It's like if we go from the scientific, the scientist wants to deny emotions. Do you know why? Because the existence of God is only something that is felt. Because it's the only way that there could be consistency within the context of what is felt. God is felt specifically as joy and love, specifically. And when people feel that, it means that the existence of God as that is present in the life of everyone. And guess what? Joy fills the heart, love fills the body, light fills the head, and consciousness surrounds all three. That is what we can be bonded to in the context of our experience. That can be literally what we are a representation of all of the time.
Hallelujah.
Yippee!